Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining my presentation on collusion by exclusion in public procurement. This is joint work with Skoda, who's also a fourth-year PhD student at the Department of Economics in Zurich. So bid rigging is considered to be a major, if not the major threat to an efficient procurement process. And this is also why a vast literature has tried to identify auction elements which are conducive or which inhibit collusion in procurement auctions. This literature mostly, however, considers single-stage standard auction formats. In practice, public procurement auctions take various forms, which are also often non-standard. So for instance, an invitation to quote may precede the actual auction, and opening bids submitted there are used for pre-selection of bidders. So the question that we ask in our project is, how does pre-selection via such opening bids affect the strategy and profitability of cartels, and ultimately, of course, revenues or savings for procurement agencies? Our contribution to the academic literature is twofold. So first, auctions with pre-selection by opening bids are essentially two-stage or hybrid auctions, and there is a theoretical literature on these auction formats. However, no one so far has done a formal analysis of collusive behavior in these auction formats. And this is where we jump in. We show how cartels may rig pre-selection to eliminate competition and how this affects profits and savings. We also contribute to the theory-inspired empirical literature on cartel detection, which, as already mentioned, usually considers one-stage standard auctions. And here we test our theoretic predictions using data on electronic public procurement auctions in Slovakia, where a reform in February 2017 allows us to observe outcomes for two-stage and standard auction. So how does a Slovakian setting look like? Slovakia uses a centralized electronic contracting platform where it's mandatory for public procurement agents to publish and award tenders of standardized goods and services. Before a tender is published, of course, the procurer has to specify the good and technical specification, as well as the common procurement vocabulary codes and the reserve price. After the publication, firms have a limited time frame to submit an opening bid, which has to be below the reserve price. Now here comes the important part. Before 2017, only the 3 bidders with the lowest opening bid were allowed to proceed to the main auction, which happened as an English descending auction with the opening bid as a binding upper bound on further bidding. After 2017, this pre-selection was abandoned in a sense that all bidders who submitted an opening bid in the pre-selection stage were allowed to proceed to the main auction. So it essentially reduced to a single stage English descending auction. And of course, the bidder with the lowest final bid in the end wins the tender. We built a theoretical model which closely mirrors those auction rules. In addition, assume risk neutrality and independent private values for the bidders. We also consider a setting where more than 3 bidders participate, such that this pre-selection rule pre-reform is actually binding. It turns out that when all bidders are fully competitive, the reform does not affect equivalent profits nor overall savings. This may seem intuitive in a sense that basically revenue equivalence extends to this setting because we have an independent private value setting with risk neutral, symmetric, and competitive agents. So in some sense, it may not be surprising to some. However, things look different when we allow for some bidders to collude with each other. With pre-selection, it turns out that it's optimal for cartel members to bid very close to each other. Why is that so? Well, effectively, the cartel has nothing to lose from such a strategy because only the lowest cartel bid matters for the main auction. However, there is a huge upside of the strategy in a sense that if this bid is the lowest among all opening bids in the pre-selection stage, cartel members, and exclusively cartel members, are pre-selected to participate in the main auction. So with pre-selection, a cartel can, in addition to, by definition, eliminate competition from within the cartel, or at least partly do that, also eliminate competition from outside the cartel. How this affects profits and savings then depends on the information that competitive rivals have. So we show that if competitive rivals are somewhat naive, the reform decreases cartel profits and increases savings. Let's go to the empirical part. We have data from the electronic contracting system in Slovakia, where we observe a time period between January 2015 and January 2020. This is a huge data set, very detailed. We have a lot of bidders, and products which are procured via this platform range from construction material to cars or transportation services to technical equipment, for instance, laptops, and finally also to medical devices. So there's a large variance of products. And in order to make similar products with different quantities comparable, we normalize all quantities and bids by the reserve price. So then we use our theoretical insights from the optimal cartel strategy before the reform to develop a collusive marker. As already mentioned, co-host bidding is indicative of collusive behavior. However, after the reform, such a strategy is not optimal anymore. So for a meaningful comparison with post-reform data, we identify potential colluders. And these are firms which frequently participate in closed bidding groups, such that we can track them across time, also to the post-reform periods. And then we consider auctions to be potentially rigged if at least one colluder participates. As a check whether this actually picks up some anti-competitive behavior, we check whether these types of auctions are also less competitive in the main auction. So the collusive marker only depends on the selection stage, but we can see that they are less competitive in the main auction. So here we can see that especially for auctions where the pre-selection rule is binding, there is a lower number of participants in the pre-selection stage who also continue to bid actively in the main auction. So competition is significantly lower for potentially rigged compared to non-rigged auctions. This also affects savings. So the savings gap between rigged and non-rigged auctions is around 4.4 percentage points, which amounts to 31% of average pre-reform savings. Now, when we look at the effect of the reform, our theoretical predictions are somewhat confirmed. So auctions which are not rigged see a slight decrease in savings. However, for auctions which are potentially rigged, according to our measure, savings substantially increase after the reform. And in effect, the reform reduces the savings gap by 48%. So in conclusion, we have shown that cartels can exploit pre-selection rules and thereby decrease savings below what would be possible without pre-selection. Of course, we do some robustness checks. In particular, we consider alternative competitive explanations for closed bidding. However, they fail to explain the lack of competition in the main auction, as we can see in the data. Also, we discuss a common value setting and find that closed bidding is also, if not even more profitable in these settings. So that's from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.